Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Rising. We, of course, have a fantastic show for you today. And we have, of course, Ryan and Rachel with us. So we're going to have a great time. But Rachel, tell us, what do we have coming up?
Well, good morning, guys. Today, Intercept reporter Andrew Fishman is going to discuss some of the protests taking place in Brazil. We've got Emily Chashinsky here to weigh in on the FTC ruling that claims that Twitter did not violate election laws when it blocked a report on Hunter Biden.
But first, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is defending the Biden administration's withdrawal from Afghanistan. During a House hearing yesterday, Republicans called the removal of troops a disgrace, while Democrats pointed fingers at former President Donald Trump, who negotiated the full U.S. withdrawal in a 2020 deal with the Taliban. Blinken pointed to the former administration for leaving a deadline in place, but not a plan of exit.
When you came into office on January 20th, we were committed to pulling everyone out of Afghanistan within 3 months, by May 1st. Did the Trump administration leave on your desk a pile of notebooks as to exactly how to carry out that plan? Did we have a list of which Afghans we were going to evacuate? Did we have a plan to get Americans from all over Afghanistan to Kabul and out in an orderly way? How meticulous was the planning for the Trump administration declared May 1st withdrawal?
Thank you, Congressman. We inherited a deadline. We did not inherit a plan.
So no plan at all. It's amazing that it wasn't much worse.
So this, to me, is where the entire story rests, because, if you watched this House hearing yesterday, it was very House. There was a lot of naming and shaming and screaming. But I think if Congress were to actually take a productive look at what happened in Afghanistan, I mean, you have to go back 20 years, but I think in this time frame, everything I want to know hinges on that statement, because Donald Trump was pretty clear, right? Donald Trump was like, we are getting out of Afghanistan. And to his credit, Joe Biden did it. He was very clear as well. But in my mind, there was no excuse for there not to be a plan. So who messed up here? Was it political and military, civilian leadership? Was it the State Department? How far back does this lack of planning go? Because I think there is a very real sense that, these generals who were directed to do things, these departments who were directed to do things, were sort of just waiting Trump out. I mean, there's evidence of this, right? You had that, the U.S. envoy to Syria bragging in the press, that when Donald Trump wanted to get troops out of Syria, he misled him. He lied to him about the number of troops that were there. So if there was actually a productive conversation to be had in Congress, it would be on this question.
Yes. And the media would cheer the generals when they would do that to Trump while he was president. And they should have been ashamed of themselves at the time, and they should be ashamed now for having done that. Whether you like the president or not, we still need civilian leadership of the military. And I do think that's what happened here, is that the military felt like, oh, that's cute that this guy thinks that he's going to get us to withdraw from Afghanistan. We've been there for 20 years. We're going to be there for 20 more. And we just have to wait him out until there's another president. And, hey, we waited out Bush. We waited out Obama. We waited out Trump. We can wait out Biden or Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders or whoever they throw at us. So they just simply didn't prepare. Kim, where do you fall down after we're now more than a month away from this withdrawal? But it does feel like to me that the military purposely did not plan for this evacuation, for this withdrawal, because they thought by not doing so they could box the leadership in, and it didn't work. And as a result, they have egg on their face.
Well, first of all, going back to Blinken's comment, I mean, listen, when Biden took over, he said, the adults are in the room now. That was kind of the sentiment that was being touted. Trump's gone and the adults are back. And they pushed that deadline back. So when Blinken says we inherited a deadline, but we didn't inherit a plan, the deadline they inherited was May 1st. They did not exit Afghanistan May 1st. So there's no reason to then say, oh, well, that's why there wasn't a really a good, succinct plan of getting out of there. They pushed that deadline back all the way to September 11th and to get out August 31st. I expected that during that time, from May all the way to September, that they were coming up with a plan, that they were going to evacuate the Americans, that they were going to be evacuating and coming up with that list of Afghans. And it does make me wonder, this is obviously a giant failure of the intelligence community, of the State Department, of Joe Biden, who's commander in chief, and obviously of the military, the Defense Department, when they didn't actually have a real good plan. Or maybe this was the plan, like kind of to what your sentiment is, Ryan, of, they really don't want to end wars. And so part of that could have been that the military leadership just sort of said to Biden, oh, we got it, don't worry, don't look over here. And then they botched it on purpose to create chaos, to then get people to say, oh, my gosh, we can't ever leave wars. I mean, that's a possibility. But another possibility in my mind is that maybe this was actually the plan. I still kind of go back now in hindsight looking at it and thinking maybe they did actually do a deal with the Taliban. And the deal was, we're going to peacefully hand this over, but we can't announce it to the American people because they'll go crazy. And we're going to leave behind a bunch of equipment. And you guys, I guess, can maybe use it and fight some ISIS people or Al-Qaeda, or maybe use it against Iran if you got a chance. And, we won't evacuate all the Afghans. We won't cause a brain drain. And that kind of I wonder. And then they said, OK, and we'll let the Americans get out because we'll have open, free travel. So I kind of wonder, still I have a lot of questions. And I don't think Antony Blinken answered them.
Yeah, I think this is my frustration a little bit with the right on this question, generally speaking, is that there's a lot of this own the libs energy around what's going on in Afghanistan. And, on the left, there's a lot of we're going to defend our guy no matter what. But if Congress was actually interested in addressing this question, this is what they would ask. They wouldn't just say, hey, it was chaotic. They would actually ask why. Mm-hmm. Because, again, there was months and months, leading up to this. But that said, there were some kind of hilarious moments in my mind that Blinken was asked about this. He had previously said that, there was a provisional Afghan cabinet, but it wasn't inclusive enough, right? That the biggest problem that we had with leaving Afghanistan was that the Taliban appointed a government that was all men, that didn't have any women in it. And he was asked about this at the hearing yesterday. And I'm just like, guys, for 20 years, we partnered with Afghan warlords who suffocated their political prisoners in shipping containers and raped children. And now suddenly we're going to virtue signal about having an inclusive Taliban government.
Right, and the U.S. would kind of foist it on different regions of Afghanistan. They would say, this particular woman is going to be, in this particular position overseeing this region, and just basically send her in, which isn't doing her a favor and isn't doing anybody else a favor. It's not as if they were facilitating some type of organic movement out in the countryside that was elevating women who were respected in the community to positions of power. That would be wonderful. They were not doing that. They were like, this lady's your boss. And how do you think that's going to go?
Yeah.
Well, and also one thing I want to point out, which is really interesting, did you see the protest of the women at the university? The women were dressed in full niqabs, and they went into the university fully covered, and they were actually supporting the Taliban. The Taliban has said that they're able to continue their university educations. And so part of me wonders with these women who say, we want this lifestyle, we support the Taliban, if there would have even been internal pushback. It's hard for, I think, people like us to really understand, and Rachel and I, especially, are career women, to really understand why a woman would say, I'm not so interested in that, possibly because of my culture or my education or my religion. But it's possible also that that was a cultural decision. I don't know, but of course, Blinken signaling to that and deflecting rather than talking about our last action of bombing that family of 10 people and the botched withdrawal that was extremely chaotic. Of course, he deflects and says, yeah, but the Taliban, look what they're doing to women. Typical, I would say.
The story of Afghanistan, and there are so many stories, I think, is just so much that we didn't understand, so much we didn't plan for, and so much of the culture that we tried to impose on them without really understanding it. If you read the Afghanistan papers, that becomes very, very clear that that was evident to our troops and our military very early on. So again, if we had a Congress, I think, that was interested at all in learning from this and addressing these questions, we'd have a Fulbright-style series of hearings, but instead, we get this.
It implicates everybody.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why they would rather not talk about it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We'd have to go back and look and see how they managed to do the Fulbright hearings and how they managed to do, after World War I, these war profiteering hearings that really looked under the hood and identified criminal activity on the part of, significant players. So how did that happen, and what has changed? Why is the current setup, political economy, incapable of that type of reflection? I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, well, I think you've said it best when you were like, it implicates everybody.
Right. Yeah.
At this point, you have people who are sitting on board seats. They don't want to lose those board seats.
Right. Yeah. Those are.
We really
those are
should be.
jobs.
We really should be carting in people from the last 20 years, one by one. Bring them in. I mean, I want to question everybody, and hold everybody accountable for this failure and this waste of money. And the lives that were lost. We need to hold people accountable. But, right, like you said, Ryan, I don't know if we will.
Right, and so somebody like Petraeus, who is significantly responsible for a lot of the strategy here, instead is writing pieces in the New York Times and getting interviewed everywhere, and just instead of being dragged into a hearing and put under oath, and heard from in that fashion, which would be a lot more appropriate. But we will have more Rising for you right after this.